Welcome to the Mystery of Life. I'm Jo.
And I'm Jonny.
And today we're asking, who took the Beaumont children? So this is a pretty famous case. This time we're in Australia. Have we done an Australian crime before?
We looked at an Australian murder house, but never like in any detail, I don't think. But who knows?
Okay, well, I've gone big here. So this was a big deal in Australia at the time, and indeed is still very much spoken about today. As with all true crimes, remember that we're giving you an overview on our opinions, and a more detailed version will be on the blog. But even then, I'm not the police. This is just what can be researched and found and is our thoughts. So, we are heading back to 1966, and we've got parents, Nancy and Jim. We've got Jane, aged 9, Anna, aged 7, and Grant, aged 4. And they live in Somerton Park, which is a suburb just outside of Adelaide.
Is that the same place where the Somerton man was found?
Yes, up the road, actually.
Oh, then we have done an Australian case, but never like a true crime like this.
We haven't done the Somerton man.
Haven't we?
No. The Somerton man is a big mystery who recently they discovered who he was.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah.
That's right, maybe we'll cover him in the future. Although it's less of a mystery now. Anywho, yes, nearby to the Somerton man, for those of you that recognise that one. They lived near to Glendelg Beach, which they went to often. I would if I lived near a beach. It's great. It was January and there was a heat wave, so it was super hot. And honestly, in January, I sort of thought, why are the kids not in school? Google tells me that their school term starts late January. So it's just completely different from what we recognise.
Christmas is their summer. So it's the end of their summer holidays.
Yeah. So it's super hot. You're going back to school soon. So it was totally normal for them to be at the beach. And on January 25th, their dad dropped them off and went to work on a 3-day sales trip. Next day, January 6th, which also happened to be Australia Day. So it's really busy, really warm. Everyone's happy. They asked their mum if they can go again. Dad can't drop them this time because he's on his trip. So they get the bus because it was too hot to walk. The bus trip was 5 minutes. It's about 3 kilometres, just under 3 kilometres away from their house. Let me be clear. These kids are alone.
What year was this?
1966.
Oh, yeah, fair play. There are so many reasons why in the 60s that was way more okay than now. Like,
absolutely. I mean,
just simple stuff
happened.
Like traffic. The chance of getting hit by a car in the 60s was very low.
Yeah.
You've got to be really unlucky.
This case, though, was the reason that most people changed their views about leaving their kids by themselves and letting them go places alone. And I will say that, like, even before, this was a time where people weren't sort of like, you know, worried about letting their kids do things without them. I do find it mad that, like, there's a 9-year-old taking care of a 4-year-old here. And I think that's just like, there is such a big difference now between how we feel today and how we felt about the safety of our children in 1966, because nothing really bad was happening that we knew of. Bad things were happening, we know that, but it wasn't as publicised and no one was as scared as they are today. Because I wouldn't do that now. That'd be mad, wouldn't it?
There was a certain level of naivety. It wasn't seen as a bad thing to do because the connections hadn't been made. And
well, no judgment on the Beaumonts here, because as I say, this really genuinely was completely normal for the time. It's
only very recently we treat kids in these like kid glove kind of way. We used to like send kids down the mines and up chimneys. Also, everything was really far away. You couldn't function if you didn't let your kid do stuff by itself.
Well, I mean, they did have a bus in this instance, but yeah, it was like 1 hour and like you knew the bus driver.
Like, there wasn't like an infrastructure like we have today. It wasn't so like, there wasn't enough in place for them to be able to responsibly keep watch of their kids all the time and them kids live a life.
And obviously the dad's got the car and he's off on his business trip now.
Yeah, like my dad used to like go to school like 5 miles away from house by himself when he was like 10.
Yeah. So I do have a clip of Jim talking about how responsible Jane is.
Sort of a girl is Jane, the 9-year-old. Is she?
Oh, very intelligent, very intelligent. You've only got to tell her a thing once, and she always does what she's told. Never to talk to any strangers on the beach. When she swims there, always in groups.
Be quite able to look after the other two.
Oh, quite capable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a limit, and I wish we could go back to the times where it was possible to let children go out and explore the world, because I think you get more rounded children that way.
They were trusted by their parents. Like, genuinely, everyone thought that this was okay. You left your doors open at night. People weren't afraid of their children being abducted because it didn't happen.
To some extent, when I was quite young, there was still a level of that allowed. It wasn't as extreme as that, but we used to go on caravanning holidays with my grandparents and all my cousins. And like the oldest one in the group would be like 10. And we'd go like a good mile and a half away from home to a beach, or like, because those caravan parks are quite big, like we'd be like near bodies of water, unsupervised, and nothing bad ever happened.
No. So the kids get on the bus at 8:45 a.m. and they were supposed to be on the 12 p.m. noon bus home. But they weren't on the 12 p.m. bus. So Nancy waited and they weren't on the bus after that either. And it's at that point that Nancy starts to panic because the first bus, you sort of think, okay, the kids, her mind even then didn't jump to immediately, there's a problem.
No.
She waited till the next bus and the bus after that. And she's getting more and more panicked as buses come and go. And of course, we're 1966, so there's absolutely no mobile phones. And initially, like, there wasn't really much Nancy can do. I did wonder, like, why she didn't go, like, walk to the beach. You know, if it's only 5 minutes away, she's a grown-up, she can handle the heat, or even get on a bus herself. But then also, I think, you know, if you expected the kids home, you'd want to be home.
No, yeah, it's advised that you, like, at least one person stays home. So
Yeah.
if she's alone, then she can't leave. Because if she leaves and the kids come back, then the
That's
kids...
even worse, yeah. And the kids might then get on another bus to try and go and find her, and you're just in this,
Yeah,
So I do sort of
feedback
get
loop.
that. It's a bad situation, but I get it. But Jim comes home early, and at 3 p.m, he drives to the beach and looks for the kids. It was super busy, but he couldn't see them. He also checks the bus stops, and Nancy started knocking on doors and contacting friends and family and neighbours nearby. By 5 p.m, they hadn't found the children, so they go to the police. So this wasn't that long a time. It wasn't like they left it a day and thought, oh, they'll be back. You know, they still recognise that there's a problem fairly quickly.
Yeah, they're not old enough to get like, oh, you need 20, they need to be missing for 24 hours. They're
No.
kids.
No.
Any time missing is bad.
Yeah, and the police do take this seriously. They broadcast the missing children on TV and the local radio. And initially they went with the theory that these are kids and they lost track of time. Maybe they lost their bus money. But they searched the beach and they spoke to people on the beach and they did thorough grid searches. Hours sped by and they started monitoring roads, rails, airports and extending the search to nearby sandhills, buildings, even the sea. I suppose that's maybe a fairly obvious one we'll come to in a minute. The next day, they were offering a reward of $250, which was a lot of money in 1966. Sounds a bit cheap now, but no, it was a big deal. Police supposedly had 3 theories at first, which was kidnapped, hiding, or misadventure. So like drowning, accident, sand dunes, various other ways that kids might get in trouble.
Yeah, the classic dinghy taken out to sea by accident, you know, like
Yeah.
tides, or even shark.
I mean, it's possible. Sharks don't really come up, but it does happen.
I don't know how sharks haven't come up. Like, if anything happens near water, and I was in Australia, my first mind would be shark, robbery,
I suppose kids
shark,
getting in trouble in the sea is the
graffiti.
same thing, isn't
Was
it?
that a shark? But anything near the sea in Australia, I'd be like, maybe it was a shark,
But I
or a
suppose,
jellyfish, or a stingray,
well,
or any of the
statistically,
things.
there's
that
not
could-
that many, like sharks attacks are not that common. But I suppose you could argue that like them getting into trouble in the sea could be any number of things, including shark.
I'd argue that although it doesn't happen often, it happens enough for it to be a concern.
Yeah.
Ain't no one been eaten by a shark off the coast of Clacton.
No. It soon became, at the time, the largest search in the history of Southern Australia, land or sea. But the police force were tiny. There was a sergeant and 4 detectives when this started. But they
Yeah, you got
called
to think
in.
scale in Australia as well. It's mental.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest land masses there could possibly be. Like, and these places are spread out. So if a guy's taken them and gone, he'd...
Yeah. Well, that's sort of what they thought. But they called in a lot of help. So they had numerous volunteers to help with the search because obviously any layperson can be part of a grid search. You're just looking for stuff. And they called in a lot of like cadets and things from local areas. So they called in as much help as possible. But they even admit today that they were just unprepared and did not have the resources to deal with the thousands and thousands of tips that they started getting.
No, they're lacking the basic stuff. They can't even like look at who came and went. They can't look at anything. Today, we'd be able to track cars, look at someone suspicious, see if we got anyone they know in the area.
Yep, none of that.
Can't do any of that.
No.
So, and because it was more of a strict disciplinarian time, I reckon it was a lot easier to abduct some kids from a beach without anyone batting an eyelid, because you could smack your kid around the back of the head and everyone would be like, the kid had it coming.
All right, well, let's get into it then. Let's start with misadventure and hiding, because I think that most of us can agree that hiding should be ruled out pretty fast. Because after a fashion, you'd be like,
Well,
Here we
yeah,
are,
unless
oops.
hiding turned into misadventure, turned into death. Let's hide in a bin. The bin gets taken. They're gone.
yeah, but again, I still think that they would have turned up at some point. Do you know what I mean? And they haven't. I'll tell you that now. We still don't know where they are. So I think that that's why we can rule out hiding pretty quickly. Like you say, yes, it might have turned into misadventure. To me, the most obvious answer was the sea. I mean, it always is. I feel like I talk about the sea In every episode we do somehow.
I'm campaigning for sharks. Cause if the most obvious answer is the sea and it's Australia, then the most obvious answer has to be sharks.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's easy to get into trouble in the sea, whatever that is, shark or otherwise.
Sharks.
Okay. There was a nearby marina which was drained on the 29th of January after a local witness thought she had seen 3 children there on the evening of the 26th, which is when they disappeared, but nothing.
Oh, what a pain in the arse.
Yeah.
Those poor workmen draining a marina
Yeah.
and for nothing because some woman thought she saw something.
Yeah, but then
bitch.
also you wouldn't not do it, would you?
No, I'm not
Like-
saying you should or you shouldn't report it, but you'd be pissed.
They also, stormwater drains and sewers were opened and flushed. And I will also say they had a bunch of stuff, the kids, with them or on them. So, for example, Jane carried some towels. There was like hair clips. They had money in a little purse. Jane had a book. Obviously, they were all wearing like shorts, T-shirts, shoes, stuff like that. Nothing was found, ever. We haven't even so much as found like the book or anything. So it wasn't like, that's the only thing that makes me think not the sea, because I feel like you'd expect them to leave stuff on the beach and go in the sea.
Do we have
Wouldn't
any
you?
eyewitness placing them at the beach?
Yeah, they made it to the beach, which I'm going to come to in a minute.
Okay.
But we believe that they did definitely make it to the beach.
I'm thinking, like, what about just a pervy bus driver? He's
Yeah.
already got them.
No.
Bus is empty, just them. He just sees his opportunity, just locks the door, drives off.
The buses definitely weren't empty, but we
Oh,
are
yeah, I suppose
almost certain that they made it to the beach because there are a few people that agree to seeing them at the beach. But then also that you could argue that the eyewitness thing, 3 small children on Australia Day that you didn't know you were looking out for at the time. How many of you are going to remember or think you remember seeing 3 small children?
Well, yeah, that's the
No.
thing, is how reliable, and doesn't mean ill intention. It just means.
But as I say, going back to the stuff, I feel like you would have found at least one thing or something. You would expect some stuff to be left behind.
All these are the most.
If you got in
all
the
these are the
sea.
most responsible children on earth.
If it's not
because-
responsible to take your book into the sea with you.
No, what I mean is that kids leave a trace.
Yeah.
So if these kids have managed to go to the beach, have a lovely day, and then pack up and not even leave one trace of fucking evidence, I'd be bloody surprised. Because adults struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, it annoys me every time I go to the beach.
Yeah,
how messy
exactly.
it's left. Yeah.
And it's not even just rubbish sometimes. It's like stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a friend often went with them, like another child around Jane's age, and she didn't go on this day, but she's been like interviewed as a grown up, and she said how she remembered that Jane was usually like super careful. And apparently she had this rule that Grant wasn't allowed to go into the sea past his belly button. So given that it's a 4-year-old, that's a fairly sensible rule. You're not going in very far.
A 4-year-old's belly button is very low.
Yeah.
So
And you're going to have like a whole bunch of like lifeguards and people like on the beach on Australia Day. So I feel like if there was 3 kids in trouble in the sea, someone would have spotted them on a super busy day. So I don't know, even though the sea feels like it should be the most obvious, there's also these things that make me think, well,
And like and kids raised near the sea are taught about the sea from such a young
Yeah.
age. I'm not saying this is every Australian child, but there is like pictures of like babies on like in papooses surfing
yeah.
and stuff like that. Like it's more in their mind to be careful around that. They understand the sea.
Yeah, absolutely. And other than the sea, the same sort of theories apply to sand dunes, I think. Unless they'd wandered really out of the way, I still think you might find some stuff.
They'd have to be influenced. That I think they'd have to be like a third
Yeah.
party, even if it's just another child.
It sounds like Jane knew not to go that far. Even if Grant had run off, I think she would have caught him and been like, stop it.
Yeah, because like kids are dumb, but if you explain to them, well, over there is death, then they're not that dumb, but they are easily convinced. So there'd have to be a third party, adult or child or teenager that has led them out of their comfort zone,
Yeah.
and then they couldn't return to it.
Even though misadventure and hiding, you can make an argument for, it then leaves you with kidnapping.
Yeah, well, the thing with misadventure and hiding is it leaves evidence.
You would think, wouldn't you? Especially the amount of people
It'd have to
that were
be-
searching. Like,
Yeah, and for the time of day, it's not like they went missing at night. It was 12 noon.
yeah. And it wasn't like it was reported 3 days later. You had police on that beach 5 hours after they were expected to have been there.
So yeah, I don't think anything could have washed anything. I think it's unlikely that something
No,
got
there was no
washed
tide
away.
between 12 and 5 p.m.
So
There was a tide, but there wasn't. The sea hadn't come in and gone back out, is what I meant.
nothing could have been swept away
No.
as such. So it does lead to the human intervention, and there's no other people, like there's no one else missing. So another child that has led them astray would probably be missing too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people either go sort of one way or the other on this, but I do think there's arguments for both.
Yeah,
It's-
to be
it's
clear, I'm
tough
not
already.
accusing a child of kidnapping. I'm
No.
saying that they've got in trouble together,
Yeah.
like misadventure. But yeah, I think it is more likely kidnapping because it's too tidy.
Well, police obviously started looking at this theory, and an elderly couple reported seeing the children playing with a tall man. Now, apparently, a few days prior to the missing, I guess, like the kids went missing, Anna had told their mum that Jane has got a boyfriend down the beach. Now, Nancy just assumed that Anna meant another little boy, a playmate. Like, she never considered that it might be a grown man. And today you might, but again, in 1966, I can see how she got to that. Oh, Jane's got a boyfriend, that type of thing. Your little 7-year-old sister because she spoke to a boy. You can see the thing happening, can't you? And now a sketch was made from the report from the elderly couple, and lots of tips came in about it and about them being seen. Now, as far as I can make out, it is generally thought that all the kids definitely did make it to the beach, as I say, because of this eyewitness testimony and others that then followed, saying we've seen the kids. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, you can't always rely on eyewitness testimony, but I think we kind of have to go with it to some extent here, especially when you've got multiple people saying it. And all they're saying is they were seen. They're not really saying, I saw someone make off with them or anything like that. They're just saying, oh, yeah, I saw them kids.
Were they able to trace their steps in any way? Like, were they able to get a witness from the bus?
A bit, yeah. Which I'll come to with one of the suspects in a second, because police decided that this was kidnap. If this was kidnap, they thought that they either knew the man or they had gotten to know the man and he had gained their confidence. So it wasn't like a complete stranger. It could have been Jane's friend that was a man, and he could have been...
It was more predatory than opportunistic.
Yeah, and that he could have been speaking to them for weeks.
He made them comfortable so that he could take them off the beach without...
Yeah, say, come with me, rather than an abduction, which would have been very difficult to abduct 3 children on Australia Day in a busy area. Well, the elderly couple reported that the man had apparently said that the kids had lost their money. So apparently this elderly couple was sat on a bench and he had come up to him and said, oh, did you see anyone touch our stuff? Someone's taken their money. Jane had a little white purse that she'd left with her towels. And this led police to believe that maybe he had taken the money and left the children vulnerable. So he could have said, oh, I'll buy you some lunch, kids. Here's some money. Come with me. We'll go and get some food. Which would make sense. Decent theory. Their postman saw them and he said that he was riding his bike down the road just across from the beach and that he recognised them. He waved and they waved back, said hello. Apparently they were all holding hands, all 3 of them. And then they were seen almost immediately after in a bakery just across the street. So that sort of makes sense that the 2 things tie in. They were going to get some food. The bakery said they bought some cakes and supposedly were overheard saying that the meat pie they bought was for the man. So they also paid with a £1 note and their mum had only given them some coins which Jane had kept in her off-white purse. So a lot of people thought this was a big deal because £1 note as well, that was quite flashy.
For an off-white purse, flashy.
But you know what I mean? To have a £1 note was a big deal. Like when you were little and your parents might have given you a £5, that was instead of £1. But a £1 note then was a big deal. And so Jane's mum would have remembered.
If £250 is a ransom, is enough money for your child, then £1 note is quite a lot of money.
Yeah, it was. And so Jane's mum would have remembered handing over a £1 note, but she gave them enough money, a few coins for some lunch and the bus fare. That was it. So somewhere she's got that money from, and that is weird enough. But then that's it. There's no other reports of them being seen after that. There is a couple of reports of them being seen in roads and places on the way to the bakery and stuff. So you can sort of give them a bit of a timeline. But after that bakery visit, that's it.
I think there's a high likelihood they were kidnapped then.
It's weird, isn't it? And why would you kidnap them and then take them to the bakery? But obviously they weren't really taken to the bakery because the postman saw them and there was just the 3 of them.
Because compliance is the easiest way. Why drag them off kicking and screaming when you can just sweet talk them with some cake and then put them in your car happily?
Yeah. Well, there were no immediate and obvious suspects, but some have emerged.
And it builds trust.
Yeah.
He's given them his money to go and buy something on their own and they've got to come back to him.
Yeah, true.
Doesn't feel very abducty at the moment, does it?
Well, they had this sketch and this circulated and the family got a lot of sympathy and kindness, but of course it was a bit of a media frenzy and there was some hoax letters and calls over the years, as is always the case, sadly.
Yeah, sickos be sickos. They were still there.
So there was James O'Neill and Derek Percy were murderers in the area at the time. These were both looked into thoroughly and ruled out more than once. I'm not going to talk about them much here because we always have this with crimes, don't we? There's always murderers in the area that could have done it because, they're murderers, they're bad guys. And they're interesting suspects, but police are confident that they have been ruled out. So I'm going to put a little bit more info about them on the blog this week, but like I've picked out the ones that seem to be more likely out of the bunch. Okay. But it also shows that the world wasn't as innocent as people remember. The fact that we're able to find like a small list of available killers in the area at the time.
That's true.
There was also a scout leader who worked and lived in the area who was later convicted as a child molester. And he was looked into again at the time, like when he was convicted. Again, the police are fairly satisfied that it wasn't him, and he was a horrible creep, don't get me wrong. But they're not even sure if he was in the area when the kids disappeared. So again, I'm choosing not to talk too much about him here. He is a really bad guy, and I'll put a couple of paragraphs about him on the blog this week, but, we've sort of ruled him out as well. Then we come to Bevan von Einem.
Well, he sounds evil.
Right, he's got the criminal name. He was convicted of a horrible crime that resulted in the murder of a 15-year-old boy and was sentenced to life in prison in 1984. Now, he was tied in with a number of other crimes and even tied to a group of pedos and killers. But ultimately, there was nothing to tie him to this as such. But everyone thinks that he's like really involved. So he warranted a quick discussion from us here, I think.
What evidence is there? Like, he was convicted of something 20 years later.
Well, because a police informant told investigators that they had heard von Einem say that he took the children and used them in some sort of weird surgical experiment that he was doing, like connecting them together, like early days. What was it?
No, I can't buy that
centipede.
someone called whatever he was called.
Von Einem.
Von Einem is doing experiments on kids. No.
He claimed that one died, so he dumped him in the Adelaide bush. And this informant had been right about many other things, including in the case against von Einem that he was convicted of. So they did take his word with some merit.
That'd be fucking mental if that's true.
But there was no way of knowing because we still don't know where they are.
No.
But police did look into this. Von Einem was proven to have gone to the Glendale beach and watched children in the changing rooms. So he was definitely a creep, but it was a long time after the kids went missing, and it was generally older kids and generally boys. So, I mean, it's possible he was after Grant and the two girls were collateral damage.
I take back what I said about there being less pedos. Apparently they were fucking everywhere.
Yeah, we just didn't know. He did look a little bit like the sketch, but everyone sort of looks a little bit like the sketches, don't they?
Yeah.
And he was looked into more than once. It was never proven, his involvement in this. So I can see why people are into this theory, especially since he was literally filmed going in and watching kids in the changing rooms there. I get that. But again, we haven't been able to really tie him to it.
Yeah, and it's a ridiculous claim.
Well, the surgically putting them together is a ridiculous claim, but he could have just taken them and killed them.
Yeah. I know. I'm just saying. It's just
that was very early. Do you reckon that's where they got the idea for Human Centipede? The weirdest and grossest thing you would ever watch. I do not recommend.
I think what you take from that film says more about you than the film.
Then there was Arthur Brown. Now, he actually did abduct a couple of kids aged 5 and 7 walking home from the bus stop just a couple of 100 metres away from the home of the Beaumonts. Their bodies were found, and he was very particular about neatness. Like, he folded up their clothes and put them next to him, and loads of later victims came forward. And I mean, it's difficult because he by the time they'd found out who he was and got him for all these other victims that were coming forward, he had developed dementia and was declared unfit to stand trial. So he never actually was convicted of any of these crimes. And they couldn't really ask him if he knew anything about the Beaumonts. But again, a good suspect. And then there's...
I just realised we've got to look for a real nutter. It's one of the hottest days of the year, and this guy's like, I need a refreshment. I'll have a meat pie.
Especially if it was warm.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's the hottest day of the year, and he's having a meat pie.
If it was cold, it's not so bad. Like a pork pie, that type of thing.
I don't know, but either way, just a pie seems very heavy for that kind of day.
Yeah. In a baker's as well, I think you'd mostly assume that a meat pie would be warm. I don't know if they kept... They must have had warm counters in 1966.
Have an ice cream, bruv. Fucking hell.
Then we come to Harry Phipps, who is generally deemed to be the strongest suspect. Now, he had a very close resemblance to the sketch. He was a millionaire factory owner and a father of 2 who lived nearby and owned a firm called Cast Alloy. He was a successful businessman and had lots of powerful connections. I feel like we've heard this story before. Now, he wasn't a suspect at the time, not at all. He was not on anyone's radar. But then, one night, years later, in 2013, Harry's grown-up son, Hayden, is watching TV and a thing comes on about the Beaumont Children. And he's like, oh, I reckon Harry, Dad, was involved in that. And obviously his wife is like, you need to tell the police, shook that no one's brought this up before.
It's not just a family quirk, that one.
No. So Harry's son Hayden gave an interview to the police, and he was 15 when the Beaumont children disappeared, and Harry was in his 40s. Hayden saw Harry talking to the Beaumonts. He said that they went inside the house and he never saw them come out. Hayden was in the garden at the time and went into the house to see what was going on, but he couldn't see them and he had to go to work, so he just left. But he also said that he had heard gunshots, but he claimed that was normal for Harry. Apparently he would just fire his gun at random and stuff, which okay, fine. I guess people do that.
Eccentric millionaire.
Yeah. But then Hayden said later on, after he'd returned from work, he saw Harry loading surfboard bags into the car. And he didn't think much of this at the time because he actually used to use these bags to carry his dresses in. Now, that sounds like a weird thing to say without some context. But apparently he's been branded the Satin Man because he liked to dress up in satin dresses and abuse his son Hayden.
Lovely.
Yeah, so it gets pretty dark. I can sort of see it from two sides. You're 15-year-old Hayden. You hate your dad because he's been abusing you. You know those dresses have got the bags in. You know those bags have got the dresses in that you obviously don't like the sound of. Do you immediately jump to there's kids in them bags? You probably don't think much of it. You probably just think, thank fuck he's going out.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, if you were going to make it up to be vindictive to the man that abused you, you wouldn't wait until as long as...
Oh, God, he's got to have been in his 80s at this point.
You could have used it at the time if you wanted to be vindictive.
Yeah.
It's not the best situation to not tell the police the information you have, but it's understandable when your dad's dressing up in dresses and abusing you.
Yeah, and also I don't think that your mind, even if your dad's a complete arsehole, which clearly this guy was, I don't think your mind immediately jumps to, oh, that's the Beaumont children in those bags. Off goes dad.
Imagine over time, in your subconscious, you make the connections.
Yeah. As the police started to investigate this, they found a couple of teenagers, or at least they were teenagers in 1966. Obviously, they are now old men. But when they were teenagers, they were aged 15 and 17. David and Robin Harkin. And apparently it was they paid him a lot of money to dig a big hole. Sorry, I should rephrase that. Harry paid them a lot of money to dig a big hole.
Mm-hmm.
It was 2 meters long, 2 meters deep, and 1 meter wide. And at the time, it never occurred to them that they might have dug a grave until years later when police were investigating and looking for anything that could possibly tie this man to this crime, that they realised, actually, what are we digging a hole for? And why was it that size?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, you're probably just thinking, money, wicked.
Yeah, you're 15, you're 17. Apparently, it was good money. And he paid him in pound notes. So they were very happy to.
That is the kind of money that
cash.
you'd have to be rich to have around, on you. I'd say that's probably about £100 or something in today's money.
I actually didn't
crazy.
do the exchange rate, but yeah, it was definitely a big deal. People thought it was.
Well, if you're offering
flashy.
£250 for your kids,
yeah. Well, this did prompt police to dig and look for bodies. In 2013, but they didn't find anything. And in 2017, after someone else was investigating, they realised that they'd actually been digging in the wrong place because the factory had moved its main gates. And to be fair to the men, obviously this was 60 years later. If you said, I did it near the gates, you're probably not going to immediately realise that
could be
everything's
that
been
could
moved.
even be a genius move on his behalf.
Yeah. But they figured out where they thought the hole was, and they dug there too, but they only found a large animal, a horse or a cow, which is also a bit weird, maybe, that it's buried.
He could also have moved them.
Yeah. And also, that how sure can we really be that the gates weren't moved more than once, or you've lost your bearings after 50 years?
No, yeah, I don't think any of that discredits. I think he's the most viable option right now.
It is weird as to why you'd want a big hole dug by a couple of teenagers, especially when you're a millionaire factory owner.
I kind of
think you'd have companies that would do that for you.
I kind of enjoy the flamboyancy of you've murdered someone, but you're so rich you don't even dig the hole.
Well, Hayden said that he was obviously very scared of his dad and that his dad had been very, very violent and carried a gun. He had actually stopped abusing him when he was around 14 because Hayden was big enough to defend himself and sort of went at him when he was hitting his mum one night. So the fact that was only a year later, it sort of makes sense. If you're no longer able to rape your own child, would you then go out and look for other people's?
I mean, yeah, if it was an innate desire, probably.
But it was never investigated at the time, and Harry actually died in 2004. So, I mean, I don't know. He was later identified in a rape case of a 14-year-old in 1979. And years later, Harry's widow actually invited investigators into their home to discuss the case. And when an investigator was there, he remembered seeing a white clip purse on a shelf in the basement. He didn't realise at the time the significance of what he might be looking at. But as he was going back and he talked to his other investigators, someone said, well, no, hang on. You realise that was the purse that Jane had. So he went back and he said, can I have a look at the purse in your basement? She said, oh, that? No, I just bought that last week. And he said, well, then why is it in your basement, like with all your other like storage stuff? And then she asked him to leave.
I mean, things are stacking up.
Yeah.
I wouldn't convict him on this, but if we're just
Well,
saying...
you couldn't. He's dead.
Like,
But
if we're saying this out loud, just as a discussion, then yeah, he looks pretty guilty to me.
But like, why, if you're covering up for him, why even invite investigators into the home in the first place? Because she wasn't like, they didn't demand to come in.
Maybe she thought it would clear his name and she didn't realise the twat was keeping trophies.
Yeah. Well, we haven't had that since. We don't know what's happened to it now.
Well, it was thrown away immediately.
Yeah. Then...
Why would you go there not briefed well enough? Because the second you said, like, I've known this case for...
all of about 10 minutes, yeah.
39 minutes. And then the second you said white clip purse,
Yeah.
I went, oh, that was the
Yeah.
kid was supposed to have something like that.
I know.
So why would you send someone in so badly briefed on the
Yep.
situation?
Yeah.
Like, that's a fuck up on the police as well.
Yeah.
Because if there was detectives that knew about the clip purse, why weren't they there?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They had a long list of all the stuff that the kids had with them. So, and this was the purse that Jane always took. It wasn't like she had an array of them at home. She just had this
It wasn't
little
old
white
enough
clip
to have
purse
like
for
a
her
full
money.
wardrobe
No.
of it. Like,
No.
unbelievable.
But
Shocking.
that's it. That's it on Harry. I do think he's the strongest suspect of them all.
I think without proper investigation at the time, that's all we're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, he's dead now.
Physical
like,
evidence is out the fucking window.
The fact that you've been able to find a couple of witnesses that help you support this is something more than you've got
Did
in
he
the
match
other.
the description as well?
Yeah,
the
he
guy?
does actually genuinely look a lot more like the sketch than other people.
That's the thing with sketches. Everyone can look like them until you see the person it's supposed
Yeah.
to be. And then you're like, oh, that
Yeah.
really is them.
And remember, he had a lot of like powerful connections and stuff. No one even considered him. No one even thought about him, even though he was like right there.
Well,
As well, his house, by the way, I should say, was like extremely close to the beach.
we know from like examples today that if you're powerful and rich enough, people won't, like, even if they suspect it, they're not going to say shit.
No.
So, and yeah, as I have a general disdain for the rich, I'm fully behind this. He's Harry.
Well, there was a couple of other sightings. There was a psychic.
No. Fuck off. No.
In November 1966,
No.
Dutch clairvoyant Gerard
No.
Crosset
Oh,
was flown
Dutch,
to
good.
Australia. He claimed he had a vision of the Beaumont Children. Big crowds gathered and he suggested a couple of sites and everyone went there and they looked, they drained, they dug, they looked. No, he didn't find them.
Good. Now, next.
There was a couple of minor leads over the years. For example, in
Were they from
1986. No more psychics. I just wanted to
Aliens?
bring it up. No aliens. No.
Okay. These are human beings.
Yes. In 1986, police found loads of documents relating to the case in some dustbins outside of some apartment buildings. But after investigation, it seemed to turn out that an elderly armchair sleuth who had collected clippings over the years and tried to figure it out herself had died and her family had thrown away all the documents.
That makes sense. Or that's a good cover up.
Yeah, maybe the family was the Beaumonts. Oh my God.
No, it's Sharks or Harry. Or maybe both, because if I wanted to get rid of a body, I wouldn't bury it in Australia.
I just thought this was interesting, but I've mentioned before there was a lot of hoaxes. Apparently there was one guy who constantly wrote to the Beaumonts and often said things like he had the kids and would like tell them about the kids. But the police actually figured out who it was eventually, 30 years later, and he was a grown-up and had long stopped doing it. He was a teenager at the time and he was like, oh yeah, sorry. And he was too late to charge him with anything. So it's like, well done, police. I'm glad you spent your time trying to figure that out, even though you now can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and like, it's a dick thing to do, but like, we can't. I'd be
Kids
annoyed.
are kids.
I'd
I don't
be
think he ever
annoyed
really
if
meant
something
any
he did
harm.
at 15 got him arrested.
Yeah.
Like for that, like not murder, but like saying something stupid and doing like a prank, an ill-advised sick prank, but a prank nonetheless.
There was a woman in Perth who claimed she lived next door to the children for 9 months, but no evidence was found to be able to make it sure that was the Beaumonts. The other thing is, why wouldn't you tell someone in month one?
No.
Why would you wait 9 months and then till they'd moved to tell anyone?
No.
And then in 1997, a detective on the case became convinced that there was a woman in Canberra who was Jane.
Why?
Well, I don't know, because she insisted that she wasn't Jane. So it didn't really go anywhere, because if this grown woman was saying, like, that's not me, leave me alone, what can you really do?
Yeah, I find it very unlikely.
I also do feel like you'd remember if you were Jane.
Yeah,
Because
like,
you were 9.
you
Now,
might-
the 4-year-old might not remember. If he then, became Ted and was raised for the next 50 years as Ted, he might not remember being Grant, because I don't really remember being 4. I know you do. You remember pretty much day 1. But like most people, I don't think remember being 4. Even 7, I can only like really maybe remember stuff from being 7.
I mean, I can remember like moments, but I don't from like being very young, but it's not like a crystal clear, this happened on this date, this happened on this date, this happened on this date. So even though I am able to like have memories from young, they're infrequent. And so you'd have to be...
So I think the younger ones could have been convinced. Jane, I think you probably would remember. I went to Disneyland when I was 9 and I do remember parts of that. So...
Good for you.
No, but I also wonder if I remember it. The reason I bring it up is I wonder if I remember it because I've seen so many photographs of it.
Yeah, or it's just something you've brought up over and over again.
So you sound a bit bitter. Someone didn't go to Disneyland when they were a kid, did they?
I never wanted to go to Disneyland. I'm more bitter that I went to Disneyland as an adult.
It's more that I think that's one of my earliest memories. So that's probably why I bring it up so much.
That's one of your earliest memories.
I don't really remember. I can't really tell you much about what I was doing before that.
I remember learning to ride a bike.
I don't remember that. I know I've done it because I can ride a bike.
I remember the exact day I learned to ride a bike.
Yeah, I don't. So I don't know, but I reckon you could remember if you were Jane.
Didn't even need stabilisers, bro.
See, you bring that up a lot. I have Disneyland, you have the non-stabiliser thing.
And the fact that I was 2.5 when I learned to ride a bike with no stabilisers.
It's just ridiculous. I sort of remember learning to ride a bike, but I don't know how old I was.
I didn't even have a bike. My sister had one, and I was frustrated by the amount of attention she was getting. So she put it down, and I picked it up and just went.
But what we're getting at here is that we reckon Jane could probably remember being Jane.
Yeah.
Even if she had been taken and raised as somebody else.
Mm-hmm. And to pester this poor woman, even if she is Jane, if she seems happy, leave her the fuck alone. She's had like a hard enough life as it is.
Well, that was the other thing. No one suspected the parents. I think we were all in agreement that they didn't really do anything wrong here. But could Jane have run them away?
I mean, like no one suspects the parents, but if the parents were abusive and Jane saw an opportunity, why couldn't she have run them? They legged it and found a way either into the system or found a neat, like nice family that could have taken them in.
Yeah.
A woman could have lived next door to them.
Yeah. I think that's what makes this such a puzzling mystery because honestly...
Because, like, again, things weren't as official back in the day.
Not at all.
So, like, if at home and these kids came up and were like, we need a home, our parents are abusive, and you were the kind of person that wanted that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You probably
and
would.
Also, all your neighbours, if you were like, oh, you know, my aunt died and these are her kids or whatever, no one would
I'm not
bat an
saying
eye.
that's right either.
Because that's what happened. You
it's
just
still
took in...
abduction, whether the kid's being abused or not. But I could see that happening as well.
Yeah.
But no, it's this Harry all sharks.
Well, eventually, Jim and Nancy separated in the 80s. Nancy didn't move for a really long time, saying that if the children ever came home, she wanted to be there. But obviously, eventually, needs must. Nancy died in 2019, aged 92, and Jim died just a few weeks ago, aged 97. If the kids were in hiding and ran away of their own accord, now might be the time when they admit who they were, because the parents are no longer alive.
Oh, they don't want the bother of it.
So you're going Shark or Harry?
Yeah, unfortunately.
I do think Harry is a very strong suspect. But I think the reason why, as I say, this is such a compelling mystery is that, like, we have so little to go on, really. We don't truly know. It might still be misadventure. They might be at the bottom of a sand dune.
We'll truly never know.
No. Probably not.
Mystery news.
So on a riverbank in the woods in a New Jersey town, they have discovered 500 pounds of pasta. I showed you this, right? Now,
I think I asked this at the time. Weight or value?
Weight.
Fucking hell, that's a lot of pasta.
Yeah, little mounds of pasta. Now, I was going to do this last week until I became enraged about swatting and the police. And since then, one of our Instagram followers has raised this with me again, Jenny. Thank you for sending this to us because I wasn't going to do it, but you're right. How can I not? How can we not talk about 500 pounds of pasta in the woods?
I mean, I love it.
It's exactly how it sounds. Mounds. It's spaghetti. Mounds just dumped in the woods in little piles.
I don't think there's much mystery here.
Well, what I find odd about it, though, is it was cooked, or at least it wasn't like the dried kind that we have.
You can cook pasta in...
Yeah, but then why would you have so much of it in piles? Like, what are you doing with it? So a local councillor...
Okay. Can I just say, as someone who's...
Well, I think I've got an answer now.
I think it's just someone having fun.
That's a lot of pasta. Where are kids getting that much pasta?
Why did I say kids? When did I say kids? I said someone having fun.
Is that fun?
I mean... Look, it's made it to the news.
I'll tell you what is fun. The local councillor called it Mission Impastable. And then criticised the Public Works Department for not cleaning it up quicker until she made it more public. When I say a lot, it was like wild pasta. It was like just mounds of it had grown. And some people had some great puns, which I thought you'd appreciate. So I'll just quickly do two. Lead suspect is a guy named Al Dente. And we should send the perpetrators to the state penitentiary. So people are having right fun with this. However, I'm pleased I waited until this week in the end, because now a neighbour has come forward saying she thinks she's cracked it. And it's being reported that this neighbour says it was a man who was cleaning out his mother's kitchen after she died. She had been hoarding, maybe it was after COVID, and he'd just dumped it by the river. But what I find weird about this is, like, it's not in a sauce. People are saying it's tinned. But if it was tinned, then why did he stand there, open all the tins and take the tins away with him?
No, I don't buy that whatsoever.
That's what I mean. It makes no sense.
I'm telling you, what's happened here is someone has, and not to disparage weed, but I assume weed is involved.
Why?
Because someone sat there and thought, do you know what would be really funny? If we cook a load of pasta and just dump it somewhere and see what people do. So they only had to bring either cooked pasta or water and pasta, and they could have cooked it all on site and dumped it. And
it's a lot, though. I think you're underestimating how much pasta it was.
I think you're underestimating how much a group of stoners can achieve.
I'm not satisfied with the neighbour saying that it was some guy getting rid of his mother's old stuff, because why would you only dump the pasta?
I've never seen in a hoarding program, and here's the room full of pasta.
No, but even if that was true, you'd have other stuff. So why would you only illegally dump the pasta, the one thing that you could compost and get rid of fairly easily, and not like a bed?
To be fair, I don't see the biggest problem, because it is biodegradable at least, so it's just going to fuck off. It's not like...
It's just weird.
It's not plastic.
I'm not satisfied with that explanation. Tell us your thoughts.
I'm telling you, it's some adventurous little pranksters, or older pranksters.
Or is it raining... Is it a chance of Cloudy with Meatballs, or whatever the film was? Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Or aliens.
Or aliens. If you have seen a bit of weird news, please do tag us. We are on most socials, or you can email it to us, hello@mysteryoflifepodcast.co.uk. We'd always love to hear your weird news. Some other news, we do have a spooky giveaway on Instagram that is open now until almost the end of May, so check that out. It was supposed to be halfway to Halloween to celebrate. I am a week or two late. And next week will be a spooky episode to tie in with that. We also have an awesome witchy collaboration coming up on the blog soon, so you can subscribe and make sure you don't miss it. And that's on the website, mysteryoflifepodcast.co.uk. And we'll be back next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.